All right, today we're diving into one of history's greatest vanishing acts. We're talking about a civilization that built some of the most advanced cities in the entire ancient world, only to be completely forgotten for thousands of years. This is their story.
So here's the central question, right? How does a whole civilization, one with massive cities, incredible engineering, and a population that stretched into the millions, just disappear? This isn't some legend like Atlantis. This is the very real, very mysterious story of the Indus Valley civilization. For over 3,000 years, it was gone, buried, forgotten, lost to time. So today, we're going to put on our detective hats. We're going to piece together how it was rediscovered, what we've learned from its silent ruins, and explore the huge mystery that still surrounds its sudden collapse. So our story doesn't actually begin with the ancient Harappans themselves. It begins with the modern-day detectives, the archaeologists, who stumbled upon their forgotten world and bit by bit started to piece together the clues. You know, our understanding of all this didn't happen overnight. It came in waves. Way back in the 1800s, a guy named Alexander Cunningham found these really strange seals but thought they were much younger than they were. Then, bam, 1924, John Marshall gets up and announces to the world the discovery of a whole new civilization. Huge news. But his digging methods were kind of messy. It wasn't until 1944 that R.E.M. Wheeler brought in modern scientific layer-by-layer digging, which gave us much clearer context. And then, after 1947, Indian archaeologists really took the lead, discovering tons of new sites and showing us just how massive this lost world truly was. And man, once archaeologists really started digging properly, what they found was just breathtaking. These weren't just a bunch of scattered villages. No, this was a network of meticulously engineered cities, built on a scale that was hard to believe. And what's wild is that almost every city they found follows a very clear blueprint. You've got two main parts. First, there's the Citadel. Think of it as the downtown public center. It's a smaller area, but it's built up high on these massive mud brick platforms, and it's where you find big public buildings like the famous Great Bath. Then, below it, you have the much larger lower town. This was the residential area, where most people actually lived. This deliberate separation is a huge clue that they had a very organized public life. And here's another sign of their incredible organization, standardization. I'm talking about their bricks. Whether they were baked in a kiln or dried in the sun, they all had a uniform size ratio. And we're not just talking about one city, we're talking across hundreds of miles. Now, that doesn't just happen by chance, right? It's a pretty strong hint that some central authority was setting the standards for the entire civilization. But honestly, the real showstopper, the thing that just blows historians away, was their sanitation system. Get this. First, they laid out the streets and drains in a perfect grid before they even started building the houses. Just think about that level of foresight. Second, every single house was required to connect to the main drainage system. Third, and this is just genius, the drain from your house didn't go straight into the main sewer. It went into a little pit first, which trapped the solid waste so only wastewater flowed out, preventing clogs. And finally, the main drains were covered with loose bricks so they could easily be lifted for cleaning. It's an absolute masterclass in urban planning from 4,000 years ago. Okay, so the cities themselves tell us a huge story about planning and engineering. But what about the actual people who lived there? What was their society like? For that, we've got to zoom in and look at the smaller clues they left behind. So you might be wondering, how do we know for sure they had some kind of government making these big decisions? It's a fair question. Well, it's all about connecting the dots. The standardized bricks point to coordinated production. The grid layouts scream centralized planning. They had uniform weights and measures, which you absolutely need for regulated trade and taxes. And those seals we mentioned, they were a system for communication and control. The main takeaway here is that uniformity on this huge scale just doesn't happen by accident. It takes complex, top-down organization. Another cool thing archaeologists do is sort artifacts to understand social differences. They basically create two piles. In one pile, you have utilitarian items, the everyday stuff like grinding stones and basic pottery, things you find everywhere. But then you have the luxury pile. These things are rare, they're made from expensive materials that had to be imported, like these beautiful little pots made of faience. When you find these luxury items concentrated in certain parts of a city, it gives you a tiny glimpse into who had wealth and status. Which brings us to what many experts consider the signature item of this culture, often called the most distinctive artifact of the Harappan civilization. We're talking about the seals. These little stone squares are just incredible. They're usually carved with these beautiful animal figures. The most famous one looks like a unicorn, and they have lines of a script that, to this day, we still can't read. So what were they for? Well, the best guess is that they were crucial for long-distance trade. You'd tie up a bag of goods, put a blob of wet clay on the knot, and then press your seal into it. It was like an ancient security tag and a signature all in one. If the seal was intact when it arrived, you knew nobody had messed with your stuff, and you knew exactly who sent it. They were, in a way, the civilization's unique calling card. So let's recap. They built these unbelievable cities. They set up massive trade networks. They basically perfected urban living for their time. And then they just walked away from it all. This is the central mystery we've been building towards, the Great Decline. Around 1800 BCE, the evidence in the ground is just undeniable. The society begins to unravel. All those distinctive things we just talked about, the seals, the standardized weights, the special beads, they just start to disappear. Writing falls out of use, long-distance trade dries up, and even the quality of the buildings gets worse and worse. The great cities were slowly abandoned. So, the big question, the one that has puzzled historians for nearly a century, is what happened to the Harappans? Where did they go? Well, there's no single easy answer. The leading theory today is that it wasn't one single event, but a perfect storm of factors. We're talking about major climate change drying out the region. There might have been catastrophic floods. The very rivers they relied on for survival might have changed course or dried up. It's even possible they just exhausted the landscape through deforestation and overuse. Most likely, it was a combination of all these pressures that slowly led to the end of their urban way of life. And all this uncertainty brings us to the single biggest barrier that still separates us from the Harappan people. See, we can study their bricks and their drains all day long, but we can't hear their voices. We can't know what they thought. And that is all because of the challenge of cracking ancient codes. That Harappan script we saw on the seals, it's the final locked door. We have thousands of examples of their writing, but nobody on Earth has figured out what it says. It remains one of history's greatest, most tantalizing unsolved puzzles. To really understand what a game-changer deciphering a script is, let's look at a later period in Indian history. In 1838, a man named James Prinsep pulled off an incredible feat of code-breaking. He cracked not one, but two ancient scripts, Brahmi and Kharoshthi. And that single breakthrough completely revolutionized our understanding of an entire empire. And here's the result. All of a sudden, inscriptions carved on giant rocks and pillars across India, which had been silent for centuries, could be read. They revealed the actual words of a powerful king, Ashoka, who proclaimed, "All people are my children." We could finally understand his laws, his beliefs, his philosophy straight from the source. That direct line to the past is exactly what we're missing with the Harappans. So that leaves us with one final thought. If we could finally crack that code, and you could ask the Harappans just one thing, what secret about their lost world would you want to uncover first? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this journey.